Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome to another video on my channel Hairliciously. If you guys are new to the channel, please make sure to subscribe so that you guys are updated on hair loss and hair transplant topics, as well as updates on current hair loss treatments in the pipeline. Visit my website at HAIRLICIOUSLY.com to purchase your microneedling device, which is scientifically proven to stimulate hair growth, my low-level laser therapy cap, DHT blocking shampoo, conditioner, and serum, hair growth vitamins, and a few other products to help those who are losing hair. So in today's video, I wanted to talk about Dutasteride, particularly topical Dutasteride, which in my opinion is currently, I feel like it's one of the best hair loss medications that is available. Over the years, I've been a big advocate in using 5-alpha reductase inhibitors like finasteride and dutasteride for the treatment of androgen alopecia. I personally have been on oral finasteride for over 5 years now, taking 0.5 milligram daily. And for the most part, it's worked well in maintaining the hairs that I have. It's FDA approved, it has a good safety profile, there are tons of data and scientific randomized controlled studies on its efficacy. Some studies go upwards to 10 years, and it's one of the best well-tolerated hair loss treatments currently available with minimal side effects. I will say that there obviously are still going to be fear mongers who are afraid of taking finasteride due to a small percentage of people experiencing adverse side effects. By no means am I doubting their claims. But if you look at the statistics for most of these cases, the chances of you getting side effects are relatively low. And most people who do experience these side effects are able to reverse it through titrating it, through using a lower dosage or taking it once every other day, or simply by cessation of the drug. And recently, last year, we know that topical finasteride has been studied upon in a randomized controlled clinical trial. People who were experiencing adverse side effects from oral finasteride were really hoping that topical application of finasteride would reduce and even eliminate some of the side effects that these people were experiencing from oral finasteride, as a result of topical finasteride being more localized directly to the scalp. And this is what the study exactly showed. The efficacy and safety of topical finasteride was compared with placebo and oral finasteride in a 24-week study. By the end of the 24-week study, change from baseline to target area hair count was actually similar between topical and oral finasteride. No serious adverse side effects were treatment related, and the best thing was that maximum plasma finasteride concentrations were more than 100 times lower, and reduction from baseline in mean serum DHT concentration was lower with topical versus oral finasteride. So what this means is that topical finasteride is nearly equivalent to its oral counterpart, all with a lower systemic exposure and less impact on serum DHT concentrations. Now, for someone like myself, who has been taking oral finasteride for the past 5 years, who isn't experiencing any side effects, there's really no need for me to switch over from oral to topical finasteride. However, I have been contemplating on making the switch from oral finasteride to topical dutasteride, not because finasteride isn't working in slowing down hair loss, but mainly because I kind of wanted to experiment with something more potent than finasteride in potentially regrowing hair, as well as beefing up some of the density on the native and transplanted areas. And to further stop hair loss in its tracks, I did notice some minor thinning recently on the frontal hairline, which, by the way, doesn't mean that transplanted hairs won't miniaturize simply because I've had a hair transplant. Even hairs that were implanted can still be afflicted and prone to DHT and fall out. And this is simply because either, number one, doctors don't really know exactly the precise region in the donor area that dictates whether hairs are genetically programmed to miniaturize and not be sensitive to androgens. And if hairs are extracted kind of like on the borderline and even outside of the so-called safe donor zone, you can still experience miniaturization. And even hairs that are still not sensitive to androgens, DHT, testosterone, can still thin out over time as you guys age. So yeah, the other concern that I had was the hairs on the sides, mainly retrograde alopecia, where the hairs have been very thin and just really fine. Hopefully jumping on something like topical dutasteride is going to help add in more density, beef up some of the areas. I did consider taking oral dutasteride in lieu of the topical, but we all know that oral dutasteride is much more potent than finasteride because it does block 90% plus of systemic DHT. So We know that, obviously it does go systemic for sure and to a great extent. And it also does, like it does with any type of oral medication as it gets metabolized by the liver. It also spikes up higher levels of serum testosterone, anywhere from like 20 to 25% for baseline, depending on which study that you're referencing, which also means that the chances of side effects are still going to be higher than finasteride. So I was looking into something more localized with potentially fewer side effects, but more efficacious than finasteride. And that's how I came across topical dutasteride. Now, I do realize that there has been some arguments on the molecular weight of dutasteride and how it surpasses 500 Daltons for optimal skin barrier penetration of the chemical. But there's also growing anecdotal findings and personal experiences of users that topical dutasteride can and is still effective in lowering scalp DH levels with minimal side effects, despite it being 500 Daltons. One great example is ketoconazole, which is a popular shampoo-based treatment for treating hair loss. It's commonly known by its brand name Nizoral. And if you guys didn't know, ketoconazole actually acts as a mild anti-androgen, and people who suffer from dandruff and fungal type of scalp issues have found using ketoconazole to be therapeutic. So ketoconazole has a molecular weight of a little over 531 grams per mole, which is about 531 Daltons. And if some of you guys didn't know, taking ketoconazole orally for long periods of time is extremely liver toxic and dangerous. But when it's actually applied topically, it doesn't go systemic in any detectable way, making it one of the the most safest treatments for treating hair loss. This implies that although ketoconazole is able to penetrate the outer skin barrier enough to bind to androgen receptors at the hair follicle, it's not going to be able to penetrate deeply enough to go systemic, or at least not to an extent that is going to be significant. And that's kind of like the same logic that follows with the use of topical dutasteride. With dutasteroide's molecular weight being less than that of ketoconazole, we don't know for a fact how much of it actually is going to get passed into the hair follicles and the androgen receptors, and how much that can or can't potentially go systemic to a level that may not be detectable. But given its molecular weight, it's implied that it should be theoretically at least as efficacious as ketoconazole when used as a topical, and it's definitely not going to be absorbed systemically to the same level as topical finasteride, given that it has a heavier molecular weight. But the good thing is that there are a few limited studies that have looked mainly promising, and most users who are on topical dutasteride have seen positive results. Now, I'm not going to reference some of these limited studies simply because there honestly hasn't really been enough data to go off of, and it seems like most are based on personal experiences. A lot of these are anecdotal, but it definitely seems to work well in the majority of users. And I've seen cases where people were able to maintain with topical dutasteride and have had good results. On the flip side, some people still do complain of side effects and going systemic. I think some people even had blood work done that showed topical dutasteride did indeed go systemic. But then again, these are still anecdotal, and it could have been influenced by other medications that they were on. We don't know exactly how much of it goes systemic. Maybe it does still go systemic to a certain degree. But in the grand scheme of things, it should theoretically be safer than finasteride, in my opinion, given that it is a heavier molecular weight. And being a topical application versus oral, it's definitely something worth looking into, especially if you want to potentially upgrade to a stronger 5-alpha reductase inhibitor that is unlikely to have higher side effects as its oral counterpart. I will say though that dutasteride and even finasteride will increase scalp testosterone levels while suppressing scalp DH levels, and ideally we want as much DHT suppression as much with no concurrent boosting of scalp testosterone levels. I will say this because some people have noticed further miniaturization due to their scalp testosterone levels skyrocketing, that obviously wouldn't have otherwise occurred as dramatically had they just stayed with topical or oral finasteride. DHT has a 5 times greater affinity for the androgen receptor, but for those who are still highly sensitive to androgens, testosterone, they can still experience a greater hair loss acceleration, especially if dutasteride is not going to be accompanied by an anti-androgen to antagonize testosterone at the androgen receptor. So, there obviously needs to be more in-depth randomized controlled trials on the use of topical dutasteride using various concentrations as well as different vehicles. I know that some of these other formulations are liposomal, others are alcohol based. It just depends on the compounding pharmacy and what they use. A scalp biopsy would really help establish exactly how much scalp DHT suppression occurs, as well as thorough blood work done prior and after. And this will, really tell exactly what the levels of DHT are inhibited, as well as it going systemic or not. This is something that I would like to highly stress on, especially if you're prone to having side effects from using 5-AR inhibitors or medication in general. That way you guys are going to have a baseline to refer back to in the case of adverse side effects, and it's going to be a lot more easier to correct. I also don't think most people realize the importance of high sensitivity testing, especially for blood work. Pre-finasteride, pre-dutasteride blood work include total testosterone via liquid chromatography with tandem mass spectrometry. Free testosterone can be tested via equilibrium dialysis. Estradiol sensitive via liquid chromatography with tandem mass spectrometry. And DHT, high pressure liquid chromatography with tandem mass spectrometry. Free DHT with equilibrium dialysis, you got to test SHBG. And with blood work done before jumping on a 5-AR inhibitor like finasteride or dutasteride, whether topically or orally, you're going to be able to assess your risk tolerance. You can literally see with accuracy, before starting finasteride or dutasteride, what the likelihood of experiencing side effects can be. For example, if you have initial low levels of DHT and free testosterone, you can see that if you deprive DHT even further with a 5-AR inhibitor like finasteride or dutasteride, you can theoretically be androgen deficient and induce potential impacts to physiological function. If you have high borderline levels of estrogen, you can end up being estrogen dominant, induce side effects like gynecomastia, sexual dysfunction, amongst a myriad of other issues. So it's definitely a good option to get blood work done. And like I said, if you do run into any potential side effects, you have something to fall back on and reassess to see what levels have been altered and by how much, and what you need to do to get back to how your baseline levels were at prior to you experiencing side effects. Anyway, that wraps up this video. In the next one, I'll be showing you exactly what topical dutasteride that I use and how I use it to apply on the scalp for treating hair loss. I will definitely keep you guys posted on my journey as I finally switch from 0.5 milligram of finasteride, oral finasteride, to topical dutasteride. If you guys have any questions, let me know in the comment section below. Let me know your thoughts on my switch from oral finasteride to topical dutasteride. Till then guys, thanks for watching, and I will talk to you guys in my next video. Take care.